Hello guys and gals, welcome to my first woodworking video. Jeez, that's a mouthful. Today I'm going to be making a wooden bird style doorstop or wedge. To be honest, my girlfriend wanted a doorstop, so I offered to make her one. My initial thought was to maybe use a nice piece of oak or maple, but she was just going to get a real cheap one, so I said I'd do one better and make it for almost zero cost. I'm using pallet wood, which is free. This piece was really flat on one side. So I used that side as a reference side, placed that face down on the planer just to flatten the top. Once that was flat, flipped it over, playing the other side. As you can see there, a massive knot disappeared from it. It's not too much of an issue because I don't need the whole piece, but looking back I probably should have used a hand plane or just taken smaller amounts off at a time. Okay, so the template I'm using was free-handed for some reference images I found online. I'm just going to stick it down with a glue stick, a Pritt stick. My plan was to cut one piece with the grain going horizontally and one with the grain going vertically, glue them together to double up the thickness of the wood, and then the grains won't match, but I was hoping that the almost crosshatch design would strengthen the wood since it was going to be really thin towards the tail. Okay, so here I'm just roughly cutting out the first piece on my cheap bandsaw, but you could do this part with a hacksaw or a hand saw, since it only has to be relatively rough. Okay, so once I've roughly cut out the design, I'm going to use that part to trace the outline to another piece of the planed wood, like I said, with the grain going the other way. This new one that I'm tracing will be cut fairly close to the line since it's an outline of a roughly cut piece anyway. Okay, once these both pieces are cut out, I'm going to just glue them together and clamp them up with a couple of clamps and then leave them for a few hours to dry. Okay, once I've clamped these pieces up, I do get a lot of glue squeeze out, but don't worry, although I don't show it in the video, I do remove the excess glue, just with my finger, to be honest. Most of the time I just wipe it off and it's fine. Okay, now it's been a couple of hours since it's dried. I move on to my belt sander, which I've put in this jig that took about 15 minutes to make. This is where most of the shaping is going to happen. As you can see, I'm using the end of the belt sander, and on that curve, it's really aggressive and really cuts into the wood, meaning I can get rid of a lot of the excess material really quickly. I also use the flat part of the wood as I'm getting close to the template, and also just to flatten the bottom of the doorstop, just to make sure that the bottom is really nice and flat. So I won't bore you with the 20 minutes of sanding that this actually did take up my belt sander. and I'll just cut along to a point where most of the shaping is done. So most of the shaping is done now. We're getting really close to the template. I'm just going to fine tune it with the end of the belt sander, just because that's going to be the most accurate because it's the smallest point, as well as the base as well. I'm also going to use the sander just to get off the template, since I did stick it down. This is an 80 grit belt, but further along I will use some sandpaper by hand just to make it nice and smooth. Now I'm going to use my router that I've secured in my work table. I've attached a piece of wood to the top just to make the base a little bit bigger because it is a trim router, just to round over all the edges to the doorstop and make it a bit more nicer looking. And one thing I want to note here is that even though I was slow and was only removing small bits of material at a time, because the wood was really thin at the end, and probably because the way the grain was going, I did lose a bit of the tail whilst I was writing it. I did lose it. My initial plan was just to glue it back on, but I have no idea where it went, so I just kind of had to change my design and improvise from here. So back at my bandsaw, and what you can see that I'm doing is I'm just going to round over the edge. Since I couldn't find the other piece of wood, that was my best idea. I'm just using the bandsaw just to take off a bulk most of the material. Okay, now I've removed most of the material. I'm going to go back to my belt sander just to clean things up, because the bandsaw, the way I was using it anyway, leaves a pretty jagged edge. So the belt sander leaves things nice and smooth. It's a bit of a weird shape, so I'm being a bit unorthodox with the way I'm using the belt sander, but I do get things done in the end. See here, I'm just using some sandpaper just to smooth everything else over, including the tail, because I couldn't quite get to everything. I've used 180 grit and then 120 grit just to smooth everything over, and I've sanded the entire thing now, just to smooth everything down. The final thing to do is I'm just, as you can see there, adding some Danish oil to the whole thing, and it's my favorite part of making anything made of wood is adding the oil. You can really see the red and orange, the reddy orange color sort of pop from the wood there. And I just give that sort of one or two, I think it was 2 or 3 coats, and that was pretty much it, to be honest. You could leave it there, but what I chose to do, if you're just using it on carpet, then that's fine. It does work pretty well. If you're going to use it on some sort of hardwood floor or laminate flooring, I suggest sticking just a thin rubber pad to the bottom just to give it some grip. well, I hope you all enjoyed the video. I know my girlfriend was pretty happy with this. It's better than a cheap sort of doorstop that she could have gotten. If you liked the video, please click the thumbs up. Any tips or comments, please leave them below, and subscribe to keep up to date with any future videos. Wherever you are, have an awesome day, and I guess I'll see you in the next one.